Here's the end of our story. They couldn't help it. Rabbit had been wagging his ears all the time, and as soon as Aslan said the hour has struck, the ears began to change. They grew longer and more pointed and soon were covered with gray hair. And while everyone was wondering where they had seen ears like that before, Rabbit's face began to change too. It grew longer and thicker at the top and larger-eyed, and the nose sank back into the face, or else the face swelled out and became all nose, and there was hair all over it. And his arms grew longer and came down in front of him till his hands were resting on the ground, only they weren't hands now, they were hooves. And he was standing on all fours, and his clothes disappeared, and everyone laughed louder and louder because they couldn't help it. For now what Rabbit was, simply unmistakably, was a donkey. The terrible thing was that his human speech lasted just a moment longer than his human shape. So then he realized the change that was coming over him. He screamed out, "Oh, not a donkey! Mercy! If it were even a horse, even a horse!" And the words died away into a donkey's bray. "Now hear me, Rabbit," said Aslan. "Justice shall be mixed with mercy. You shall not always be a donkey." And this, of course, the donkey twitched his ears forward, and that also was so funny that everyone laughed all the more. They tried not to, but they tried in vain. "You have appealed to Tash," said Aslan, "and in the temple of Tash you shall be healed. You must stand before the altar of Tash in Tashban at the great autumn feast this year, and there in the sight of all Tashban your donkey's shape will fall from you, and all men will know you for Prince Rabbit. But as long as you live, if you ever go more than 10 miles away from the great temple in Tashban, you shall instantly become again as you now are, and from that second change there will be no return." There was a short silence, and then they all stirred and looked at one another as if they were waking from sleep. Aslan was gone, but there was a brightness in the air and on the grass and a joy in their hearts which assured them that he had been no dream. And anyway, there was the donkey in front of them. King Loon was the kindest-hearted of men, and on seeing his enemy in this regrettable condition, he forgot all his anger. "Your Royal Highness," he said, "I am most truly sorry that things have come to this extremity. Your Highness will bear witness that it was none of our doing, and of course we shall be delighted to provide your Highness with shipping back to Tashban for the treatment which Aslan has prescribed. You shall have every comfort which your Highness's situation allows, the best of the cattle boats, the freshest carrots and thistles." But a deafening bray from the donkey and a well-aimed kick at one of the guards made it clear that these kindly offers were ungratefully received. And here, to get him out of the way, I'd better finish off the story of Rabbit. He was duly sent back by boat to Tashban and brought into the temple of Tash at the great autumn festival, and then he became a man again. But of course 4,000 or 5,000 people had seen the transformation, and the affair could not possibly be hushed up. And after the old Tisrock's death, when Rabbit became Tisrock in his place, he turned out the most peaceable Tisrock Colorman had ever known. This was because, not daring to go more than 10 miles from Tashban, he could never go on a war himself, and he didn't want his Tarkans to win fame in the wars at his expense, for that is the way Tisrocks get overthrown. But though his reasons were selfish, it made things much more comfortable for all the smaller countries around Colorman. His own people never forgot that he had been a donkey. During his reign and to his face he was called Rabbit the Peacemaker, but after his death and behind his back he was called Rabbit the Ridiculous. And if you look him up in a good history of Colorman, you will find him under that name. And to this day in Colorman schools, if you do anything unusually stupid, you are very likely to be called Rabbit. Meanwhile, at Anfard, everyone was very glad that he had been disposed of before the real fun began, which was a grand feast held that evening on the lawn before the castle with dozens of lanterns to help the moonlight. And the wine flowed, and the tales were told, and jokes were cracked, and then silence was made, and the king's poet with 2 fiddlers stepped out into the middle of the circle. Aravis and Cor prepared themselves to be bored, for the only poetry they knew was the Calorman kind, and you know now what that was like. But at the very first scrape of the fiddles, a rocket seemed to go up inside their heads, and the poet sang the great old lay of fair Olven and how he fought the giant Pyre and turned him into stone, and that is the origin of Mount Pyre, because it was a 2-headed giant, and won the lady Liln for his bride, and when it was over they wished it was going to begin again. And though Bree couldn't sing, he told the story of the fight at Zulindra, and Lucy told again, they had all except Aravis and Cor heard it many times, but they wanted it again, the tale of the wardrobe and how she and King Edmund and Queen Susan and Peter the High King had first come into Narnia. And presently, as it was certain to happen sooner or later, King Loon said it was time for young people to be in bed. "And tomorrow, Cor," he added, "shalt come all over the castle with me and see the estate, and mark all its strengths and weaknesses, for it will be thine to guard when I am gone." "But Corn will be king then, father," said Cor. "Nay, lad," said King Loon, "thou art my heir. The crown comes to thee." "But I don't want it," said Cor. "I'd far rather—" "'Tis no question of what thou wantest, Cor, nor I either. 'Tis the course of the law. But if we're twins, we must be the same age." "Nay," said the king with a laugh, "one must come first. Art Corin's elder by a full 20 minutes, and is better too, let's hope, though that's no great mastery." And he looked at Corin with a twinkle in his eyes. "But father, couldn't you make whichever you like to be the next king?" "No. The king's under the law, for it's the law that makes him a king. Has no more power to start away from thy crown than any sentry from his post." "Oh dear," said Corin, "I don't want to be at all. And Corin, I am most dreadfully sorry. I never dreamed my turning up was going to chisel you out of your kingdom." "Hooray, hooray," said Corin. "I shan't have to be the king. I shan't have to be the king. I'll always be a prince." "It's princes that have all the fun." "And that's truer than thy brother knows, Cor," said King Loon. "For this is what it means to be a king. To be first in every desperate attack, and last in every desperate retreat. And when there's hunger in the land, as must be now and then in bad years, to wear finer clothes and laugh louder over a scantier meal than any man in your land." When the boys were going upstairs to bed, Cor again asked Corin if nothing could be done about it. And Corin said, "If you say another word about it, I'll knock you down." It would be nice to end the story by saying that after that the two brothers never disagreed about anything again, but I am afraid it would not be true. In reality, they quarreled and fought just about as often as any other two boys would, and all their fights ended, if they didn't begin, with Cor getting knocked down. For though when they had both grown up and became swordsmen, Cor was the most dangerous man in battle, neither he nor anyone else in the northern countries could ever equal Corin as a boxer. And that was how he got his name of Corin Thunderfist, and how he performed his great exploit against the lapsed bear of Stormness, who was really a talking bear but had gone back to wild bear habits. Corin climbed up to its lair on the Narnian side of Stormness one winter day when the snow was on the hills, and boxed it without a timekeeper for 33 rounds, and at the end it couldn't see out of its eyes, and became a reformed character. Erebus also had many quarrels, and I'm afraid even fights, with Cor, but they always made it up again, so that years later, when they were grown up, they were so used to quarreling and making it up again that they got married so as to go on doing it more conveniently. And after King Loon's death, they made a good king and queen of Archenland, and Ram the Great, the most famous of all the kings of Archenland, was their son. Bree and Hewin lived happily to a great age in Narnia, and both got married, but not to one another. And there weren't many months in which one or both of them didn't come trotting over the pass to visit their friends at Anfard. And that's the end of The Horse and His Boy, and we'll start our new book on Monday, and I will see you then.